many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. Got quite a few mixed articles to go over, and I'm going to cover kind of wide range. Get into police brutality, the potential for the collapse of the dollar. Get into a little foreign policy issues and a few other things we'll cover. And I do have one Common Core thing I did want to share, something that we've talked about on the broadcast, and I wish I could remember exactly what date it was when I had one of the Common Core activists, policy changer, I guess you could call her, Kelly Coles. I had her on the broadcast going over Common Core and the work that she was doing in Ohio, that she was hoping that would spread. That was a pretty good interview. I don't remember the date right offhand. I have it somewhere, but not sure where, because I am kind of in the midst of transferring things, so I got everything kind of moved around right now, and I really don't know where much of the stuff is. But the one Common Core thing I'm going to share is a math teacher actually explaining a math problem, and it's a pretty interesting clip that I'm going to play. I will do that here in a second. Okay, here we go.
Helper.
Yep, and today our math teacher, Eileen Ryan from Williamsville's Maple West Elementary, teaches us basic math using a base 10. When you and I were in school, we used to just memorize 9 plus 6 equals 15. Not anymore. With the Common Core, students need to understand why that's the case, and Mrs. Ryan is here to explain.
Thank you. So
our young learners might not be altogether comfortable thinking about what 9 plus 6 is. They are quite comfortable thinking about their friend 10. 10 is emphasized in our young grades as we're working in a base 10 system. So if we can partner 9 to a number and anchor 10, we can help our students see what 9 plus 6 is. So we're going to decompose our 6. And we know 6 is made up of parts. One of its parts is a 1, and the other part is a 5. We're now going to anchor our 9 to a 1, allowing our students to anchor to that 10. Now our students are seeing that we have 10 plus 5, having now more comfort seeing that 10 plus 5 is 15. That's much more comfortable than looking at 9 plus 6, an isolated math fact.
All right, you got all that? No, you...
So they want the children to have to think harder about the process of doing math. And that's one way that they do it. They've exposed other ways that they're having math problems done, which again, a lot of it does go back to tens and base numbers that they want to call them 5, 10, 2, 4. They make up all kinds of algorithms. And, you know, a lot of people would go, you know, memorized when they were young, 3, 3 equals 6, 4, 2 equals 6, 5, 1 equals 6. You know, when you have those bases down for understanding, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know, so on, you learn how to add, you know, it shouldn't be that difficult by making a 10. Basically, they're saying that they're trying to teach them a harder way, and it should be acceptable. Some of these math problems that I've seen out there are just whacked out. They're completely whacked out. And you know, the problem that we're going to face is colleges are going to start making their entry tests more towards a Common Core type teaching curriculum. Let's just call it what it is. When this happens, a lot of people that are teaching their kids, maybe homeschooling them, it's one of those things that when we get to that point, you're going to see extremely smart people not able to get a degree. They will be trying to force the system on you to the point where even homeschooling, if you want your child to go to college, and there are needs for college classes. I think a lot of the classes anymore, though, are just absolutely ridiculous. But there's still a need for colleges. You know, surgeons. There's a lot of fields that colleges help out in. But you as a parent, if you're homeschooling, will have to basically teach your children these type of methods for them to be able to get into a college. And I hope that those homeschoolers don't lose that energy to do that. And when you can get to a point where you can teach your kids that way and be like, but this is a better way to look at it. Teach your kids the right way, and then teach them another way to do it that will allow them to get through those tests. And I think that's putting a lot of pressure on homeschooling parents that already have a lot of pressure. And, you know, parents that, if you do send your kids to public school, try to, you know, teach them the correct way to do things. Try to make sure that they're taught maybe a grade level ahead of what grade they're going to be going into. Because another thing about this Common Core is it's basically going back grade levels. They're taking courses that would have been taught in 8th grade and now say, well, they should be a high school class. And these students that are now not able to take certain classes in high school will be the ones getting into college and paying to take those classes in college. And then the homeschooled students that might have been taught the normal way to do math, they're going to be the ones that are not accepted into college unless they were also taught the Common Core way. So I think that is something that really needs to be in a lot of people's focus. And I think there's a lot of colleges that people might have some influence with that can hopefully keep them from changing those standards. I think there is a chance for a lot of the private schools, maybe the more conservative schools, I hate to say it that way, that, you know, it would have to be like, Notre Dame or something. But I think those are the people that would try to hold their standards a little bit more traditional. Not saying that we could expect more. We probably should be expecting more out of kids, but I think we spend a lot of time in meaningless classes in school. I think kids, spend too much time in school, and parents spend too much time at work. But that's a society that we, for generations have allowed to create, where, kids a lot of times don't have responsibility until they reach their 20s. When before kids will, at a very young age, even what I would consider too young, had a lot more responsibility. And they actually, took that responsibility and, ran with it. In a way, we progressed to a point where kids, can spend more time learning. More education, and that's good to a point, but I think that it's one of those things where we shouldn't expect them not to have responsibility on top of that. And with how many hours your kids are at school, when they have to come home and spend all night doing homework on top of being at school all day, I think that also takes away from responsibilities that they could have at home, and that interaction that they can have with their parents. doing things that need done at home. And, there's a lot of rural, people that they work on a farm. They have responsibilities at home. And it's one of those things, definitely fall season, a lot of those kids, they really, really struggle through it because they have to get the crop in. They have to help their family get the crop in, but they also have a crap load of homework because school has started. And I remember one grade, first day of school, I probably went home with, I would say maybe a half inch of worksheets. First day. First day. No teaching, just you need to do all this, and here's the books, and figure it out because we need to start cramming this stuff in because of standardized testing. It became one of those things where they really had no choice. They were trying to cram a lot in before testing, and if we fail at the testing, they're looked at badly, even by parents. And someone put in the chat, history taught by Common Core curriculum is a lie. Yeah, a lot of the curriculum being created to go along with the Common Core standards, that's why I say Common Core is a curriculum, because there has to be a curriculum to go with the standards, because that's what they have to cram down your throat as a kid. You look at it, and it's all created to a very, very bias that they're trying to rewrite history. And there's a lot of history that needs to be written correctly. I wouldn't, argue with that too much. But there's a lot of it that's just being rewritten into another lie. The way maybe Christopher Columbus was written in a lot of history books. If you might look at that, you might go, well, the history books on Christopher Columbus weren't telling about, wiping out indigenous people. Talks about discovering America. That's it. And then that turns out to not be completely true. No one ever told someone. It just adds up, and that creates a lot of ability for conspiracy theories to exist, because, well, when you find out most things are a lie, you start going, hey, well, maybe everything I believe I know is a lie. And then, people, when they do that, I consider that them waking up. I really do. I think that's them waking up. But that means they have to re-educate themselves. So we have a society that is slow to react to the growing tyranny. Okay, I had a clip here I was going to play. Let me see if I can find it here. Okay, this one is from AMTV, and this is ISIS attack America 9/11, what you need to know. And I talked about this last broadcast. It seems that everything is being put into place to create another attack, whether it be a false flag or allowing it to happen as a pretense to, maybe martial law or to distract most people. And, this is something that I'm kind of worried about. And what they might use any type of, situation on the U.S. to their advantage. And it's kind of crappy. So, here I go. Well, maybe.
Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV Alternative Media Television. Will ISIS strike America on September 11, 2014? This is the message being sent by the mainstream media. And I've never seen fear propaganda at this level. And it's amazing because people accuse people in the alternative media of doing the fear-mongering when it's really your own government, your own media, controlled by the statist agenda that is responsible for the fear and sending that message of war, loud and clear. Again, will ISIS attack America on September 11th? There was a report that 11 commercial airliners were stolen at Tripoli Airport in Libya. You know, the same place that the President of the United States was running guns into Syria and allowing the Caliphate and ISIS, the violent terrorist organization, really to grow in the first place. 11 commercial airliners stolen in Tripoli. In fact, the pictures are all over social media. And the mainstream media is linking this to another future September 11th style terror attack. You know when planes go into buildings, allegedly, even though Building 7 just crumbled to the ground in a perfect demolition and was never hit? You see, they've got to amp the fear card. They got to raise the alert level. It's white hot. And that's the message they're sending to the American people. I even read a report in the mainstream media that said that 9 out of 10 Americans could potentially die if and when ISIS strikes America's electrical grid. 9 out of 10. Almost 100% of the U.S. population massacred as a result of a potential and possible attack by ISIS. Now, of course, this is fear propaganda. Of course, the Obama administration has been building this narrative with people getting their heads chopped off, even though that first video with James Foley was a fake. And then the second video, bullshit, right? Fear propaganda, they're amping it up. You see, where George W. Bush was an overt warmonger, he just went in and started invading places like Iraq for no good reason. Obama is covert. And that's why he's been building covertly ISIS. He's been helping them grow. That's what running guns from Libya into Syria, you know, the scandal that was Benghazi Gate, Christopher Stevens, that's why he's allowed this to happen. Because it gives him a reason to start the limited airstrikes, which have now mounted into the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of airstrikes in Iraq and soon to be Syria. You see, this is all a part of destabilizing Bashar al-Assad's regime. And you see, I think people are beginning to understand the motive here. I think that they're beginning to understand that ISIS came to power because of the United States. You see, the United States props up dictators like Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein. They get them to work for them for a while, and then after they're finished with them, they cut their heads off. They murder Muammar Gaddafi. They get rid of Saddam Hussein. This is all a part of the gross destabilization campaign that makes up the war effort in the Middle East. And although people are putting the pieces together like a puzzle, they're beginning to understand that the United States government is responsible, that Barack Obama, no different than George W. Bush. The question that people are failing to ask is why? Why does the United States continue to destabilize this part of the world? You see, the answer to that question, honestly, is pretty complex. But we can simplify it because we have a war of two worlds right now, folks. We have Western civilization and really the Christian West, and then we have everybody else. And we have parts of the world in the Middle East, what the United States portrays as Islamic extremism, fighting each other. In fact, Phil Robertson's of that great show, Duck Dynasty, that millions of Americans like to tune into, said, either convert them or kill them. Those were his exact words regarding ISIS. Pretty strong opinion, but you see, their opinion is the same of us. And it's why they're actively and why they intend to kill us. But we're portraying the same message back. You see, this is a war of worlds. This is a war against Western civilization, crony capitalism, the insolvency that makes up the United States today, bank bailouts into infinity, 0% interest rates, this soulless Kim Kardashian world that nobody really gets anything out, and everything structurally at the core is rotten, versus this religious extremism, this sectarian violence in this part of the world warring with each other. And it's why NATO has structured a war effort for some time against these countries. It is why they've propped up dictators and then killed them. It's why they continue to destabilize this part of the world, because it's a part of the agenda. Again, George W. Bush overt about it, Barack Obama covert in his mission. They're taking out the entire Middle East, folks. They're taking out places like Somalia and Northern Africa. This is all happening, and it's happening now, in real life and in real time. So when I ask the question, will ISIS attack America on September 11th? I don't necessarily know the answer, but I know it's a question of when, not if. When these people strike, it will be devastating. We could argue that they've already attacked the Western core. What do you think September 11th was? You know, the United States government, and part of building their narrative, I think would actually, from a sinister perspective, actually like the fact that ISIS attacked America because it would rally the war effort. They'd use it as propaganda. In fact, they might just engineer it themselves, just like they did September 11th, 2001. That's what we're dealing with, folks, the New World Order. A war of worlds, battling it out. Whether or not you want to acknowledge this at end times, as end times or not, it's the truth. It's the reality. And it's a matter of time before these people strike us at home. And your government is responsible for catalyzing this effort. It gives the Obama administration a reason to attack these countries, and it's why they've allowed ISIS to grow. It's why they've allowed Libya to be toppled into chaos. It's why they've helped the revolution and re-revolution in Ukraine. We are at war with the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This is about money. This is about economics. This is about a war of two different worlds, Western civilization, Islamic extremism. And it's all coming together. What happens next? God forbid ISIS strikes America at the core and does bring down our grid. And 9 out of 10 every Americans perish as a result. Who's to blame for that? You know, you need to start asking yourself these questions. Will you fight in places like Iraq again, the same country Obama said he was going to withdraw from? Will you fight in Syria? Because it's a matter of time before ground troops are back, folks. You can't win a war against ISIS without ground troops. In addition to limited airstrikes, they need forces on the ground. And the question you need to ask, will you be fighting? Will you be fighting for crony capitalism and bank bailouts here in the United States of America? This structurally rotten system? You know, we need to look at our own problems here in the United States. We need to flush out the criminals of Washington, D.C. today. We need to do something about that first. These people at the top of the upper echelon of Washington, D.C., folks, have lost all of their credibility, and they cannot be trusted. They are responsible for these heinous acts, and they are responsible for future heinous acts. And again, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. ISIS, the new boogeyman, the new Al-Qaeda, the new target for self-destruction. I'm Christopher Green. Get this out everywhere. Make it viral. Hard-hitting it in your face. And click the link below to support our sponsor. Check out our...
So, again, AMTV. Jules brought up in the chat about there's a video out there of a guy carrying a fake head, dressed like he's ISIS and going across the border. And there was also ones, the guy that did all the things on Planned Parenthood did some where he dressed up as Bin Laden and went across the borders. It's crazy because there's absolutely, no precautions at the border. And we have ISIS growing. Supposedly they have 11 planes. I even see reports of 13. But 11 planes supposedly. We have, the anniversary of 9/11 coming up. We don't really see any hype when it comes to the threat that they might pose from the administration or the mainstream media. It's pretty evident that everything is being put into the favor of the people that want to hurt us. So whether it be an orchestrated thing by government or something where they know what's going on and they're going to allow it to happen, take advantage of it, and like you said, use it for propaganda. This is just... It's completely idiotic. But if you want to go fly... just get ready to strip down for them. Let them grope you. Because, you could be a bad person. While it's pretty obvious that they don't really care about catching any bad people when they've even claimed to have found Islamic literature pamphlets and stuff on the border and books. It's just idiotic. We have to be aware that they plan on allowing something to happen to try to clamp down on the American people. I really think that's pretty obvious. I just don't see anything being done. Okay, now I do have one here. This one's from Adam Kokesh. Computer program is better than human therapists. And I'm a person for the advance of technology, but I would be really iffy about having technology being your therapist. And, you know, it might be something just as simple as a program that tries to help you through a situation. But with technology growing, it could really get more controlling and brainwashing. Definitely, you know, you have 3D, 4D TVs and all this super high, you know, clarity, and it's just, I'm really cautious about things like this, but we'll see what he has to say.
Writes to Adam at AdamVersusTheMan.com. Subject, therapy robots? Question mark. One of the cool predictions you made, which stuck in my mind, was the idea of therapy robots being able to help you sort out your problems on a case-by-case basis. This would help a tremendous amount of humanity overcome emotional thinking and work out the logical solutions as if you had your therapist right there at a moment's notice. Now, this is actually a lot bigger than Matt makes it out to be, because I think of you know, my future predictions as being testable, at least subject to a simple test of, is this something that's already happening now and something that's been happening leading up to it now, as opposed to just a fluke that I'm extrapolating from. The reason this is so important in this particular prediction is understanding government as violence. Think about the definition of the word itself. Govern, to control. The mechanism of control being the application of force or violence, coercion, right? So what makes people violent? What makes society violent? And you can look and historically prove now that we are living in the most peaceful times in human history. That is a beautiful thing to be celebrated. Yeah, go team people. And what we have done, and coming to this point, is the only violence that we really accept or support is, aside from self-defense, the institutionalized violence and coercion of government. So we've kind of gone from where anybody can do violence whenever they feel like it, with, you know, flimsy excuses, or because the king said so, or because God told them, or because I'm the biggest guy and I can pick up the biggest rock, so I'm in charge, so screw you, to today, where the greatest violence that we get comes from modern, institutionalized, bureaucratic, democratic governments. And if you understand that that violence still has a psychological root, what is it that drives that violence? What insecurity, what fear, what irrationality, or as Matt says, emotional thinking? So my prediction, my fantasy, if you will, about where we're going in the future and how we're going to overcome government as a phenomenon is that at some point in technological development, we're all going to get therapy robots. Now, are they going to be actual robots, or a chip in your head, or just something to program on your computer? Of course, I was always open to all of those possibilities, but you can imagine that at some point we're going to have the technology where you're going to have I don't know, floating robot maid in your house, right? That's going to have a computer in it that's smarter than you. That's only a decade or two away at this point. And anytime you start yelling at your wife, it's going to be there over your shoulder. Tell me how you really feel, Adam. And be able to diffuse the situation and talk to you about your childhood and get into the real issues here. And when you were able to address all of these root psychological problems, I mean, think about why people fall sway to politicians who use fear to manipulate them into supporting policies that are immoral and obviously not even in their own best interests. So I think if we can address that, it's going to be one of the key things that makes me very confident that we are evolving past statism as a form of institutionalized violence. So how is this happening today? Well, you can already tell with computers and the growth of the internet how people are able to connect like never before. I mean, how many of you have had some personal problem in your life and Googled how to get over a girlfriend who just dumped me? You know, I mean, there's and there's forums about this. There's people who have written stories about this, because the anonymity of the internet provides a powerful way for people to connect when they've gone through traumatic events or they have psychological issues, as opposed to turning to violence. So already this is happening. I mean, just think about how many connections and how much therapeutic benefit humanity has already gotten from the internet. And I'm not just talking about sexual healing. So, well, you are correct again, once again, Mr. Kokesh. Via The Economist, We will all have our own therapy robots. It's happening. If you are as correct with your other predictions of the singularity and eye contacts, and that, by the way, that's that we're going to have cameras in our contact lenses, but computers in our brains. If you don't want that, you can just have the contact lens. I eagerly await our transhumanist future with no state and the maximum amount of human liberty and prosperity and liberty. Matt McKibben. The story is from The Economist. The computer will see you now. Ellie is a psychologist and a damned good one at that. Smile in a certain way, and she knows precisely what your smile means. Develop a nervous tick or tension in an eye, and she instantly picks up on it. She listens to what you say, processes every word, works out the meaning of your pitch, your tone, your posture, everything. She is at the top of her game, but according to a new study, her greatest asset is that she is not human. When faced with tough or potentially embarrassing questions, people often do not tell doctors what they need to hear. Yet the researchers behind Ellie, led by Jonathan Gratch at the Institute for Creative Technologies in Los Angeles, suspected from their years of monitoring human interactions with computers that people might be more willing to talk if presented with an avatar. To test this idea, they put 239 people in front of Ellie, pictured above, to have a chat with her about their lives. Half were told truthfully that they would be interacting with an artificially intelligent virtual human. The others were told, falsely, yes, you can lie in the name of science, that Ellie was a bit like a puppet and was having her strings pulled remotely by a person. Designed to search for psychological problems, Ellie worked with each participant in the study in the same manner. She started every interview with rapport-building questions, such as, where are you from? She followed these with more clinical ones like, how easy is it for you to get a good night's sleep? She finished with questions intended to boost the participants' mood. For instance, what are you most proud of? Throughout the experience, she asked relevant follow-up questions. Can you tell me more about that? For example, while providing the appropriate nods and facial expressions. I mean, sounds like the perfect therapist. This is perfect. Like, I want to talk to Ellie. I learned something about myself from talking to a computer. This is like a pretty cool exercise here. But this is also the sort of typical idealized experience that you would have with a good therapist. The problem is no therapist is perfect, and most people have a certain psychological reluctance to fully openly communicating with them. So, lie on the couch, please. During their time with Ellie, all participants had their faces scanned for signs of sadness and were given a score ranging from 0 to 1. Also, 3 real human psychologists who were ignorant of the purpose of the study analyzed transcripts of the sessions to rate how willingly the participants disclosed personal information. These observers were asked to look at responses to sensitive and intimate questions, such as, how close are you to your family? And tell me about the last time you felt really happy. They rated responses on a 7-point scale from -3 to +3. All participants were also asked blah, 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 blah. Dr. Gratch and his colleagues reported that though everyone interacted with the same computer program, their experiences differed markedly based on what they believed they were dealing with. Those who thought Ellie was under the control of a human operator reported greater fear of disclosing personal information and said they managed more carefully what they expressed during the session than did those who believed they were simply interacting with a computer. Imagine that. When you know that your therapist is incapable of judgment, you will get more from the therapeutic experience, even if it's just a computer doing it. And really, the process of a therapy session is really pretty simple. As it says, there's rapport building, getting to know you, understand your background. There's probing questions that are like, looking for psychological issues that can be improved upon through greater self-awareness, and then the kind of questions that make you feel good about yourself. Don't flatter yourself. You're not that smart. A computer can do the job at least as well as you. Crucially, all right, I take that back. There's something about a human connection that will never be replaced in people's lives. But for the most important of psychological problems that lead people to violence, I'm pretty confident saying that we're going to find a better answer through this kind of technology than from human-to-human therapy. Crucially, the psychologists observing the subjects found that those who thought they were dealing with a human were indeed less forthcoming, averaging 0.56 compared with the other group's score of 1.11. It's a pretty big difference. The first group also betrayed fewer signs of sadness, averaging 0.08 compared with the other group's 0.12 sadness score. Did you see what this means? You are more likely to cry when talking about how your parents didn't satisfy your emotional needs as a child in front of a computer than in front of a human therapist, or rather in front of a computer that you know is just a program than in front of a computer that you think is being controlled by a human. That's really powerful information right there. This quality of encouraging openness and honesty, he believes, Dr. Gratch, will be of particular value in assessing the psychological problems of soldiers, a view shared by America's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is helping pay for the project. Uh-oh. DARPA's behind this. Never mind. It's all bullshit. Soldiers place a premium on being tough, and many avoid seeing psychologists at all costs. And I mean, I've dealt with PTSD myself. I can tell you this from experience, although it's really not a big secret that when you're conditioned that way to be tough, that you're going to be more likely to open up to a computer than a real person, especially when you have confidence that confidentiality is going to be respected. If you think that the computer, now where does this go with like actual application? I have a feeling that in order to give people the absolute confidence, because I wouldn't do this over the internet. Obviously, the NSA is listening. If I was in the military or if I was a veteran, I wouldn't go into my commander's office and be like, well, let me sit in the corner and talk to your computer therapist that's probably going to record all this shit for my record. No, but if you could have a truly independent device that was sold as secure and simply programmed to do this, I think a lot of people would appreciate this as an experiment. I mean, I certainly, if this came on the market today, I'll tell you, I would buy it and I would try it. If you could capture this technology in a smartphone-sized device, I could turn it on, I could see a face, I could program it for what I wanted, and it could do all of this for me. Yeah, I think that would be valuable, even for enlightened self, Adam Kokesh. Yes, so that means conditions such as PTSD, to which military men and women are particularly prone, often get dangerous before they are caught. Ellie could change things for the better by confidentially informing soldiers with PTSD that she feels they could be a risk to themselves and others, and advising them about how to seek treatment. If, that is, a cynical trooper can be persuaded that Ellie really isn't a human psychologist in disguise, because if Ellie can pass for human, presumably a human can pass for Ellie.
Okay, I don't think he sees the possibilities for manipulation, possibilities for basically knowing interferes and being able to manipulate people if that information is stored, kept, or a backdoor is there for people to access that information. I'm going to open the phone lines, 718-717-8296. Feel free to call in. If you have me on Skype, you can hit me up there. And, I want to know, what's your opinion on this? Would you have a robot in your house, or would you interact with a virtual therapist like this? Or, what information have you seen about the robot's potential for the pros and the cons, and, any information an opinion that you would like to share? Again, 718-717-8296. Feel free to call in. When I heard facial scan, I was right there and then. I'm like, it's getting to be able to recognize your face, recognize the emotions of your face, and if you're in a bad mood and kind of huffy and puffy, it's going to know that. When you're emotionally broken down, it's going to know that. And if this information is being kept on you, or it's being able to be accessed on you, what potential do they have? Definitely if it's recording your inner fears, would it be able to play off that? And then by facial recognition, it could tell whether what it's trying to do is working. I think it opens a Pandora's box that I think would be a large enough Pandora's box that could really help secure the obedience of people. And I'm kind of surprised for Adam Kokesh that he would not see those possibilities. Now, he talks about a secure, portable, therapist where it's not connected. But the problem is everything that you own anymore is connected. And I don't think a lot of people, which I can't say that I do too, know exactly how to, constantly keep secure. And anything you do can be worked around eventually. But I do try to take steps to protect myself, so it's one of those things that I wouldn't trust things like this, even if, it's just a software program. It's not an internet program. Well, whether it's an internet program or not doesn't mean that it doesn't connect to the internet. And is there a backdoor that people could connect to it? I think fears like that should keep people away from things that really can, through, smart computers could really be able to manipulate you and get you to do things that you normally wouldn't do because, well, they know how to manipulate your, inner fears or whatnot and control your actions. And just seeing how corrupt everything is, it just doesn't really give me extreme hope. So, I'm not one for having robots in my house. It's bad enough having all this internet and everything. Again, I try to take precautions to protect myself, but there's always going to be workarounds, and you're always vulnerable to a certain point. All you can do is try to protect yourself. Okay. I'm looking for an article I seen. Can't find it now. Well, I guess on the next one. If it'll load. I think my internet is starting to act up again. Everything's going extremely slow. Okay, here we are. This one by Ron Paul out of Voices of Liberty. This is about the ISIS Iraq. Obama's strategy for ISIS Iraq should be just come home. It says here, this edition of the weekly column covers President Barack Obama's non-existent strategy for dealing with ISIS, known as the Islamic State and the situation in Iraq. I question why Obama administration cannot simply ask Syrian President Bashar al-Assad for help, as Syria has never threatened the U.S. From the column, why does the U.S. government insist on aligning with theocracies in the Middle East if there is anything that contradicts the U.S. Constitution and American values is the theatric government. I don't believe that a majority in the Middle East wants to live under such a system, so why don't we keep pushing it on them? Or why do we keep pushing on them? Is this why they call promoting? Is this what they call promoting democracy? A lack of strategy is a glimmer of hope. Perhaps the president will finally stop listening to neocons and interventionists whose recommendations have gotten us into this mess in the first place. Here is a strategy: just come home. And I think that definitely is a strategy, just come home. But I don't think Obama is going to act on what neocons and interventionists and the progressives are saying. I really don't think it has anything to do with that. It's not the war hawks and everything. He might be able to be pressured to a point, but the only way he's going to act on this is if ISIS is just so out of control and beyond America's control. They're we'll provide you weapons if you do this. If you start doing this, we won't. It's one of those things. I think the only way he's going to do anything is to send a message to ISIS saying, I'm in control. And I think ISIS will still be used. Or he might do nothing to allow ISIS to attack the U.S., which seems to be more the direction he's going. And, one thing Ron Paul said is just come home. The thing that needs to happen after they just come home, though, is a major rehaul on the defense of the country and the ability to, scramble and on a minute's notice. When they first signed that, a plane has been, taken over or something, be able to scramble. And when that doesn't happen, that's on the, government officials in charge. All the way up to the president. Because that's where the government should be, if we're going to have this government, is worried about the actual defense of our freedoms, not attacking our freedoms while attacking other people's freedoms. Doesn't, play into what society I believed I was living under at one point in my life. I guess I always knew something was off. It just seems that this ISIS thing is being played up for them to take advantage of. I think in a way they want you to know that it's coming, but acting as they don't know how to stop it. And then we'll find out later that probably it came across the border. We have no security on the border. And there's videos all around showing it. Now, there's some news I'm going to play out of RT about Ukraine and the rebels halt fighting as peace plan implemented. And a lot of people are saying this is victory. And I don't know, where this is coming from or if Russia's involved in the peace planning or anything, but we'll see here.
We begin with big news on the Ukrainian crisis. The separatists and the Kiev government have agreed upon a ceasefire that hopefully would become the first step towards ending the 5-month-long conflict. The UN Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, and the OSCE have welcomed the truce that was reached this morning at 10 a.m. Eastern during talks in Belarus. The caveat of the peace deal between the warring factions is that both sides agreed to an all-for-all prisoners of war exchange that could take place as soon as tomorrow. And also, they agreed to allow humanitarian aid access to affected areas. RT's Paula Slayer has more.
The ceasefire agreement was signed between representatives of the Lugansk and Donetsk Republic and the Kiev authorities. It has been welcomed from around the world, and here where I am in Donetsk city, it certainly seems as if it's holding. There hasn't been any kind of artillery firing or gunfire, but of course it's difficult to say right now what is the situation in other parts of the country. It was a 12-point plan. Many of these items coincided with the 7-point plan that the Russian President Vladimir Putin put forward 2 days ago. Now, it does follow a telephone conversation earlier in the week between Presidents Putin and Poroshenko. Both leaders at that stage agreed that they were on the same page in wanting a ceasefire to come about and also in terms of how they saw it happening. Now, the Ukrainian president has called on both his foreign ministry and the Organization for Security and Cooperation of Europe to implement the ceasefire, and he says that he will do everything possible and impossible to make sure it happens. We're certainly also hearing from anti-government fighters that they are laying down their weapons, but that if Kiev does anything to break the truce, then they will be forced to take up arms again.
That was RT's Paula Slayer. Now, Petro Poroshenko did raise some eyebrows during his statements at the NATO summit, where he refused to name the country who he claims is supplying Ukraine with, quote, high-precision weapons. Meanwhile, Presidents Obama, Francois Hollande of France, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi all vowed to back Ukraine by having further sanctions against Russia at the ready. Today, when asked if the current ceasefire in Ukraine would have an effect on the sanctions, President Obama said the following.
So it has to be tested. And I know that the Europeans are discussing at this point the final shape of their sanctions measures. It's my view that if you look at President Poroshenko's plan, it is going to take some time to implement. And as a consequence, for us to move forward based on what is currently happening on the ground with sanctions, while acknowledging that if, in fact, the elements of the plan that has been signed are implemented, then those sanctions could be lifted, is a more likely way for us to ensure that there's follow-through.
So, you know, where this is going, I don't think sanctions played any part in this. I think this is all kind of in a way planned. Not planned the way it happened, but planned in the sense that we are going to hear a lot of this hyping up as border problem was still going on. You know, while the ISIS problem was growing. And we did spend a lot of time on the whole Russia-Ukraine thing. And it seems that the only ISIS stuff that comes out is propaganda. It's one of those things you don't really trust any of it. You just look at the possibilities and try to find out what possibility is more in line with what could happen in reality. And with a border open the way it is, with what's going on with ISIS, and not just, try and bring our troops back from Iraq, but from around the world. We should have, these people as everyday citizens that are ready to defend everybody if we're attacked. But they don't like that. They want that disconnection with soldiers and everyday life here in America. I think that's what helps play into PTSD is, if they're stationed in another country and they're stationed there for long periods of time, and they kind of lose that disconnect with the culture that they're supposedly defending, which, even though we haven't had total freedom, we've had really one of the closest things with a developed nation when it comes to freedom. And we do have our flaws and we do have our problems, which continue to grow instead of reduce. And that's where the major problem comes in, is you got the disconnect with a lot of these soldiers that are operating overseas. And it's hard to remember a lot of times if you're never here what you're fighting for. And you really become a mercenary, I think, after a point. And I think some of them realize that. And they have a hard, hard time dealing with that fight that they have in their head. And, I know that, my grandfather, he was in World War II, and he was stationed in the Philippines during peacetime, and there was still things going on there, and things he told me, and he kind of thinks about it when he talks about it, and he in a way can justify it because of what threat they were under, but it was one of those things there's still something wrong about it. It's something that in his own personal life he's moved past, but he does recognize flaws in everything. And he's at that point where, he doesn't dwell on things like that much. He's kind of focused on, taking every day as it comes. And my grandmother is now in a rehabilitation place, trying to get healthy enough to be able to come home. She hasn't been doing well, but we always hope for the best. And again, we learn, take every day as it comes and try to prepare for what you can, but you can't always be perfect. So, all you can do is try to be a good person. And I think, when you combine philosophy with your everyday life, when it comes to freedom and liberty, it helps you interact with people. But you really have to soak it in. And, it's being able to interact with people you disagree with in a peaceful way. But that has to go both ways. Certain people can only be pushed so far before they feel like they're backed in a corner and they have to defend themselves. And I think a lot of times that becomes a misconception, is that someone that, is just as much a part of the fight as the other person. No, they've kind of been backed in a corner. I think a lot of that's obvious to most people anymore. Sometimes I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but we can always learn from each other and grow on our ideas and our discussions and interactions about our differences. A lot of times we can always come to a conclusion that a freer society that allows for us to live our lives the way we choose without harming others and, vice versa, and respecting each other's rights to do that. I think that's what creates a society that when you look at it that way, you really interact with society in a better way that spreads. It spreads like wildfire. It's one of those things, pass it forward type deals where you do something for one person, they tend to maybe do something good for another person, and then it just starts spreading like wildfire. And the people that are trying to run the game, to run our lives, they understand this and they use it all the time. Look at the ice bucket challenge. This is used all the time, and I think it's pretty important that us as voices, activists, all that, we need to understand that too and be able to use that to our advantage, because a lot of times we are caring people. We don't want to see people harmed. We don't want to see people in trouble. We're really not different than a lot of the people that are kind of brainwashed, but they'll donate. They want to help people out. Well, we're not different, really, when it comes to that. We care too. We just are aware of maybe more of the flaws in certain things. Like, there's a lot of organizations people donate to, and, well, maybe someone more aware and realizes that, well, only 10% of their donations actually go to a cause, might go, no, I'm not donating to them for that cause. I will find a, organization that when I donate, almost 100%, maybe they can skim 5 or 10% off the top if you will, donate to someone that does that, for them to, pay people to sit there at a phone or pay a, answering service to take calls for donations. Sometimes that stuff actually costs money and they have to pay for it. Maybe you're willing to allow that 5 to 10% taken off the top. But, maybe the whole 10% going to the cause isn't so desirable. Okay, I have some articles here. I have a few, and I'm trying to decide which one I want to start off with. I think I might start off with this one right here. Okay. This one's good cops cross thin blue line in Florida, turn on bad cops. Broward County, Florida, with all the negative attention given to police officers lately, the public is left, and this is out of the antimedia.org. Says here, given to police officers lately, the public is left wondering if there are any good cops left. The bad apples seem to have spoiled the cart, but in Broward County, several cops stepped forward to break the thin blue line in order to turn in one of their own. I believe a good cop exist when they start turning in the bad. For Broward County deputies, that day was today. Former Broward County Deputy Eduardo Mesa is accused of stealing from a man that has been killed by a train in January. Mesa is alleged to have stolen the victim's prescription pills. Detective A, it says here's a little author's note, Anti-Media is withholding the names of the cops that turned Mesa in to protect them from any officers who would view their actions as an assault on the thin blue line. So it says here, Detective A reportedly saw the amber bottles of prescription pills in the victim's possession, but the pills were never logged into evidence. Detective A did some preliminary checking, hoping that the pills had been innocently misplaced, then contacted Detective B, who obtained a search warrant for Mesa marked patrol vehicle. Most of the pill bottles still bearing the victim's name were reportedly discovered. A warrant was issued for Mesa's arrest. The local criminal justice machine did not go easy on Mesa either. He has been charged with armed trafficking of hydrocodone, possession of alprazolam, grand theft of controlled substance, evidence tampering, and falsifying an official document. The armed trafficking charge stems from the amount of drugs that were stolen and the belief that the former deputy possessed his service weapon at the same time he possessed the narcotics. Sheriff Scott Israel, Mesa's former employer, seemed to have no objection to the stiff charges. He said, when you commit a felony and you're carrying a firearm, as I've said many, many times, we're not above the law. We're right there with everybody else. Armed trafficking typically carries a minimum mandatory sentence of 10 years. And the amount of hydrocodone gives the charge a 15-year minimum mandatory sentence. So, it looks like, well, in this situation, good cops are really being held up and not so far being attacked. And again, that's why Anti-Media decided to withhold the names of the officers who turned Mesa in to protect them from attacks from maybe other law enforcement. But we have another one here. This one out of the freethoughtproject.com. This is what happens to good cops who expose corruption in their departments. A Baltimore City cop who attempted to hold his fellow officers accountable for on-the-job misconduct has been intimidated to the point of leaving the police force entirely. Detective Joe Crystal became a target of intimidation for his entire department after testifying against other officers in a misconduct case. Following his testimony, he received threats from other officers and even found a dead rat on his car one day. He saw a wrong and decided he couldn't live with himself and did the right thing and was punished. I think that's unbelievable. Nicholas Pantelikis, Crystal's lawyer, said. They don't care about anything but saving their money and saving their hide. It's absolutely ridiculous with what this man has gone through. One, it lets the Baltimore City Police know they were wrong, know that they've done numerous things against him, and that we're wrong. Pantelikis added. Crystal has currently filed a lawsuit against the department for the intimidation that he has encountered, but the department has responded by opening up an investigation into Crystal's activities. While on duty, in the course of their investigation, they accused Crystal of misusing his take-home vehicle, stemming from a time where he took his wife home in the car. The department then offered to drop their investigation if Crystal would drop his lawsuit against them, but he has refused. The case is still ongoing. But this week, Crystal turned in his badge to the department and will no longer be a member of the police force. Last week, we covered the story of Sergeant Brandon Ruff, a 8-year veteran of the Philadelphia police force who filed a police brutality lawsuit against his own department. Additionally, we also conducted an exclusive interview with Dallin Gore of the St. Louis Police Department, who lost his job after driving a man home instead of arresting him. We frequently define a good cop as one who tries to stop the bad ones. If this is the common response to good cops, it's no wonder why there are so few. And I'm going to play this short clip here. Give it a second here. We see this happen a lot when cops do try to step up, and that's why I was surprised with the first article I went over that covered the fact that the sheriff and the police force were standing behind each other while exposing crimes and with their own people. And that takes a lot of guts, I think, in this type of society where we see the opposite happen with cops that try to expose the truth. But here's this clip.
A Baltimore City police detective who claims he's been intimidated on the job is leaving the force. He says he's been harassed since testifying against fellow officers who were convicted in a misconduct case. WJZ investigator Mike Kelgman is live with what the city is now offering to keep him quiet. Mike.
A settlement, Vic. This is it. They're basically offering to drop an investigation into his use of a take-home car. If he agrees not to sue them for any intimidation on the job, they also don't want him to talk about it to reporters or anyone else. His lawyer says that is disgraceful and shows the department is not serious about rooting out corruption. Detective Joe Crystal will no longer be a member of the Baltimore City Police Force. His lawyer says his work environment has become intolerable since Crystal testified against an officer and sergeant who were later convicted of misconduct. That intimidation against Crystal includes somebody putting a dead rat on his windshield.
He saw a wrong and decided that he couldn't live with himself and did the right thing, and he's been punished. And I think that that's just unbelievable.
Police promised a full investigation months ago into Crystal's allegations, but so far nothing has come from it. In fact, Internal Affairs recently opened an investigation into Detective Crystal himself for taking his wife home in his police vehicle. And then police offered to settle with him. WJZ obtained this offer from Baltimore City, where if Crystal agrees not to sue over witness intimidation and not to speak publicly about how police handled it, they'll drop any case against him.
They don't care about anything but saving their money and saving their hide. It's absolutely ridiculous. With what this man's gone through, it lets me know the Baltimore City Police Department know they were wrong.
The police response: we have many officers who separate from the agency for various reasons. These are personnel matters which we do not comment on. The commissioner previously said Detective Crystal has his support for coming forward as a whistleblower and recently spoke one-on-one with WJZ about the importance of rooting out corruption.
Standing before police officers in the community and saying, I will not tolerate misconduct, that's building trust.
Actions speak louder than words, and we've seen no actions.
And Crystal plans to turn in his badge and formally resign tomorrow. Reporting live, Mike Helgren, WJZ Eyewitness.
Okay, and really, should we be too surprised? should we really be surprised that other cops don't step up to the plate? Definitely in these large cities, there really seems to be a true, that thin blue line. So it's one of those things that I think that we need a lot of these smaller county, maybe, departments to really step up to the plate. And I've said this many times, that the county sheriffs have the ability to weed out the corruption a lot of times in the city cops, which is, it seems to be where you find most of the corruption. Not saying that you don't find it in the county too, but you have the ability to affect that, and you yourself could run for sheriff. A lot of times in a lot of the smaller areas where maybe there's not a lot of protests going on, there's not a lot of outrage, you might have a better chance, running for your local sheriff. If you want to call in, 718-717-8296. Feel free to call in. Again, that's 718-717-8296. And if you have me on Skype, you can just hit me up that way too. When I was looking at a lot of the negative stories that were out there, I just wanted to bring in one, and that's not the only time that we've seen good cops. And that's another thing, it tends to be the sheriff. So, I don't want to always seem like we're demonizing law enforcement. It's the ones that are really, I'm going to actually pick my battles. I'm not going to let my boss pick my battles for me when I don't think that they're constitutional and they abridge other people's rights. And I think that's something that we should focus on. I am going to kind of switch subjects right here unless I get a call and anybody wants to comment or share their opinion or story. But one I want to get into, I had it from multiple sources, but I'm trying to find it here. I had two of them right here. Okay, there it is. One of them is from Judicial Watch. And this one here, out of their press room. New IRS documents show Lerner did not need conservative group donor list. Email mention secret research project by top IRS official. Says here, Judicial Watch today released a new batch of IRS email documents revealing that under former IRS official Lois Lerner, the agency seems to acknowledge having needlessly solicited donor lists from nonprofit political groups. According to a May 21st, 2012 memo from the IRS Deputy Associate Chief Counsel, such information was not needed across the board and not used in making the agency's determination on exempt status. Later in her May 10, 2013 remarks, in which Lerner first revealed in response to a question she planted about the IRS targeting conservative groups, she conceded that the response for donor names was not appropriate, not usual. The new documents obtained by Judicial Watch also reveal that 75% of the groups from whom the lists were solicited were apparently conservative, with only 5% being liberal. The documents came in response to an October 2013 Judicial Watch Freedom of Information Act lawsuit filed against the IRS after the agency refused to respond to 4 FOIA requests dating back to May 2013. The emails are contained in the 6th batch of documents the IRS has been forced to produce in response to the Judicial Watch FOIA lawsuit. Contained in the newly released IRS documents is an email from Deputy Associate Chief Counsel Margot L. Stevens that was sent in response to a question from Lerner concerning attempts to return donor lists from the IRS had controversially obtained. In Stevens' May 21st, 2012 email to Lerner, she wrote, "Lewis, I wanted to get back with you with respect to your option whether tax-exempt and government entities could return to those organizations from whom donor names were solicited and questionnaires following their submission of applications for recognition of their tax-exempt status under 501c4. Now that TGE has reviewed those files and determined that such information was not needed across the board and not used in making the agency's determination on exempt status." Key parts of this email and other documents the IRS produced to Judicial Watch have been blacked out. Many of the documents are completely blacked out or partially redacted, seemingly because they are allegedly pre-decisional or deliberative information that might be exempt from disclosure under FOIA. The administration's decision to withhold this information is completely discretionary and is not required by law. A subsequent IRS email thread on July 27th revealed that inappropriately obtained donor lists were being used for a secret research project, and that a top official wanted then acting IRS Commissioner C. Miller to decide how to handle the issue. The email exchange with the subject line donor names included the following. And I'm not going to read the rest of this, but that's from Judicial Watch, and you can find all that information there, and it really goes on for quite a while. And that's just, one thing that's really coming out that's really kind of unraveling everything. And there was another one I seen out of the Blaze. This one claims emails of 5 more workers related to congressional investigation have been lost. Washington IRS says it has lost emails from 5 more workers who are part of the congressional investigations into the treatment of conservative groups that applied for tax-exempt status. The tax agency said in June that it could not locate an untold number of emails to and from Lois Lerner, who headed the IRS division that processes applications for tax-exempt status. The revelation set off a new round of investigations and congressional hearings. On Friday, the IRS said it has also lost emails from 5 other employees related to the probe, including 2 agents who worked in a Cincinnati office processing applications for tax-exempt status. The agency blamed computer crashes for the lost emails in a statement. The IRS said it found no evidence that anyone deliberately destroyed evidence. The news comes as House Republicans on the Oversight and Government Affairs Committee said there may still be a way to recover the lost emails of ex-IRS official Lois Lerner. The committee has recently learned that Treasury Inspector General for tax administration has identified 760 IRS exchange server drives from the relevant period that currently exists and could contain Ms. Leonard's emails. Representative Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio, wrote in an email to IRS Commissioner. Give me a second here. John Koskinen. Lerner, who is the center of the IRS targeting scandal, recently defeated the Fifth Amendment and has thus far refused to talk to congressional investigators about the tax agency's handling of conservative groups. Republicans like Oversight Committee Chairman Darrell Issa, Republican from California, have alleged a cover-up at the IRS. And I think that's kind of evident, I think, to most people. Most people are not really looking at this going, well, you know, that happens. And it happens so often that just happens to be that everyone involved in the investigation had their computers crash. Just so happens. There's no signs of a cover-up. No. You know, it happens all the time in an investigation when, you know, people get investigated for computer crimes that all of their information just suddenly disappears from all the servers and backup servers. Happens all the time. Now, we know that's a lie, and computer crimes are always, you know, prosecuted against other people, and a lot of the times these are hackers. And even their attempts to get rid of information fail at times. So we know that there's a little flaw in that whole way of thinking. And whether they'll actually uncover all that, I don't know. It's one of those things that it's kind of up in the air, I think. Now, I'm debating on whether I have time to play this clip. I don't know how long it is. If my computer doesn't freeze up, which it seems to want to do. Just try to load a simple web page. My computer's been doing this all day, and it's been really, really weird, and there's chatter in the chat about it. It's fine 1 second, and then bam, it's done. So I'm not sure what the hell is going on here. Now I can't get any of the pages to load. Hopefully I don't lose connection with the network. But it has happened. Looks like we might be okay here. Okay, everything's starting to pop back up. Let's hope it all loads now. maybe. Great, here we go again. Yeah, okay, there we go. I'm hoping that was just as simple as a update loading or something. I doubt it though, because it was happening on all my devices today. On some of them I could watch the signal completely just drop off and then come back on, drop off and come back on. And I don't really have anything I can do about it. Okay, all my stuff is loading back up here. Now, Next News Network put out a clip here, and I seen it and I wasn't sure what to think by the title, because said, "Is the Constitution the problem?" That was the title of the clip. And it's one of those things that I don't think the Constitution is a problem. I think it is flawed. And I think there was a chance in history that we could have gone, okay, here's the Constitution, we're allowed to amend it. Let's become an even freer society to the point that we don't even need any type of governing body. That we just live our lives, do what we need to do to live, survive, create, innovate. And if someone comes around trying to push other people around, everybody unites and pushes those tyrants out. We could have went that way. Instead, we've grown government to a point that it now is the one running around pushing people around and making them do things. And those are the ones that are supposedly to protect our freedoms. And this was kind of interesting, so I'm going to go ahead and play this clip.
Retiring Senator Tom Coburn has grown disenchanted with Washington's gridlock, so the longtime Oklahoma Republican is pushing for a national convention to amend the Constitution. Support for a convention of the states to overhaul the national charter has increased among conventional conservatives. Some are frustrated by Congress's failure to reform entitlement programs. And under Article 5 of the Constitution itself, 2/3 of the states can call for a convention to propose constitutional amendments. The Washington newspaper The Hill noted all 17 times the nation has amended the Constitution since adopting the Bill of Rights in 1791, it has done so by proposing changes that won 2/3 support in the Senate and House and were then ratified by 3/4 of the states. Notably, the original 1787 Constitution forged by the Federalists forged a rather strong central government. But the Anti-Federalists, including Patrick Henry, successfully pushed for the Bill of Rights to provide various protections from the central government's overreach. The First and Second Amendments, of course, provide for freedom of speech and the right to bear arms, respectively. But today, Congress feels hard-pressed to achieve consensus necessary to perform even the most basic government functions, like keeping it funded. Therefore, a convention of the states looks attractive to Coburn and others. He said, quote, "I think we ought to have a balanced budget amendment. I think we ought to have term limits. I think we ought to put a chokehold on regulation and reestablish the powers of the Congress." Coburn, a physician, is battling cancer, yet he's battling for a constitutional convention which he says may allow the legislature to seize back powers that the presidency has acquired over the years. The Hill observed, quote, President Obama's use of executive action to pursue an array of policy goals related to climate change, immigration, and healthcare reform has precipitated what many conservatives are calling a constitutional crisis. Coburn reportedly contacted Patrick Henry College Chancellor Michael Farris and Citizens for Self-Governance President Mark Meckler. Those two are leading a push for a convention. And the state legislators in Florida, Georgia, Alaska have already passed a proposal that Farris and Meckler have discussed with Coburn. The proposal calls for a constitutional convention to focus on term limits and a balanced budget. But let's step back a moment. Nothing prevents the federal government from enacting term limits and balanced budgets now. So how would etching those into the Constitution guarantee them? The Constitution already says that Congress must declare war for war to that to happen. But America hasn't had a declared war since World War II. Yet the U.S. has been at war almost nonstop since the Korean conflict. That breaks the bank and leads to unbalanced budgets. Some say the Constitution is more flawed than is commonly realized. The book Hologram of Liberty by Kenneth Royce alleges that the Constitution, despite its good points, may have contained the seeds of tyranny cleverly planted by an early aristocracy. Yet the U.S. Constitution is highly respected around the world, although the U.S. government only obeys it on a highly selective basis. Farris said the goal is for 20 additional state legislatures to adopt the proposal in 2015 and the remaining dozen or so to endorse it in 2016. He wants to hold a convention before the next presidential election. But while these men may have valid concerns, we're left to wonder whether amending the Constitution would really change the federal government's behavior. Will it?
That from Next News Network. You know, I look at it and I go, do I trust anyone in the government not to start introducing more draconian, tyrannical legislation, or not even legislation, but amendments into the Constitution if they call for another convention. And, you know, that's what I fear, you know, at this point. You know, are we too far gone to be able to have a constitutional convention? And even if it's good, what's going to make government follow it when they subvert the Constitution how it is? You're not going to be able to change that unless more people start, you know, basically making all this unconstitutional, you know, abridgment of your rights, you know, invalid, to basically, you know, through civil disobedience, be able to thwart all these type of tyrannical actions, these draconian ruling class. And it's really not until we as a people start changing how we do things. You know, you see someone walking down the street and they throw trash at a trash can and it falls on the ground. They really don't notice it. Cop yells at them, they don't stop, and cop runs up and, you know, starts beating the person. When is society going to get to a point where that's not possible? Even looking like a stormtrooper, that these actions will not be accepted by the people. And, you know, a lot of people will always go back and, you know, even, you know, I go back to that video that's went viral of a soccer game, and some guy runs out on the field holding a sign or something, and, you know, these cops start beating him. They tackle him to the ground, and they just start beating him, and then before you know it, the soccer players and the crowd pour in and basically run the cops off. Because they're wrong. They're being tyrannical. someone that was not being, threatening was basically getting pummeled with nightsticks. Those people, including the soccer players and the crowd, said that's not acceptable. Society there said it was not acceptable. That was a reality check for those officers that then realized that people are not going to let them get away with that. They might have got away with it before, but it's not acceptable. Because you have a badge and a gun doesn't mean you have these extra rights to someone that stopped when I said so. I beat him with the nightstick until blood was coming out of every orifice. That's not acceptable in any type of situation. You have a right to self-defense, and these people claim rights that we as individuals can have, and there's a simple philosophy to that you can't vote for someone or vote for a group of people and give them rights that you don't have. If you don't have them, you can't give them. Therefore, you can't say, well, they got different rights or extra rights. No. There's rights and there's things that aren't rights. And to say that they can be elected with extra rights is an idiotic argument, I think, because you can't make extra rights. You can't give extra rights just by voting for someone. Or a majority going, that's okay. Because then you're abridging the rights, the actual rights of others. The idea of freedom, I think, is growing at a fast rate. And I think that we're getting to a point where the elite are actually getting worried. And that's why I think we see, the thing with the border, the thing with ISIS, the ramping up of police force and turning them into you're turning them into basically military. Just, not called military. It's military, we just won't call it military. So you see the ramping up of that, and I think that's a sign that they're getting worried. And the people out there and all kinds of different groups have been making workarounds of the system. Bitcoin, more bartering going on. People actually rejecting GMOs to the point that even these big corporations are going, we got to look at non-GMO stuff. People don't really want to, they rather grow themselves, and it's one of those things that they're recognizing that to try to hold on to business, they really need to, start going with what the people are wanting. And a lot more people are going, I don't want GMO food. I'd rather have the natural stuff. There's a possibility it might not be extremely bad for me, but I'm not taking that chance. Because there's things out there that tell me that it could be bad for me. And even if it's not completely true, I don't believe, the wolf guarding the chicken coop to tell me whether the chickens are okay. Hey, wolf, chickens doing okay in there? As he's licking his lips, yep, they're fine. Not usually going to be your best result. You know, it's one of those things where independent research and whistleblowers that, well, they found problems and they try to bring it up with the upper people, and then they're fired and the reputation tarnished. As long as you say the right thing, you're okay. We're paying you to tell us what's good about the GMO, not what's bad. Do research on this and tell us what's good about it. Well, this is what's good about it, and I found this bad. Oh, you're fired. You'll never work in this town again. I think it's more than that scary movie you watched. I think this is the reality of how things are working, because really, these people want everything and want control of everything. They see the world as their playground. A lot of them, I think, too, are played as pawns. There's a lot of them that they're given the world because they're willing to do whatever it takes. That includes selling humanity down the drain. They don't care as long as they got what they want. And I think a lot of times when they step out of line, they're blacklisted. They're, never work in this town again type thing. It's one of those things that it's what we see in the police forces. Harassed and threatened to the point that you no longer feel safe at work, and really you don't feel safe in that town anymore. And more than likely, you'll probably get a bad review and not able to find another job doing that. And I think that's where alternative radio, alternative news, alternative networks out here have a chance to shine, is where the good people are basically washed out of the system because, well, they were the good ones. That's bad nowadays. To be good is bad, to be bad is good. We're kind of in an upside down world. All the alternative networks out here, they got places for those type of people. The people that really want to show the good in humanity. To spread, the truth. To spread freedom. To spread liberty. And I think that's why alternative media is slowly becoming the mainstream media, because it's really a grassroots thing. No matter how grassroots they try to make all these mainstream network shows, it never comes off because it seems so scripted. Now, you could obviously tell I'm not too scripted. Sometimes I'm a little bit all over the place, but it probably has to do with me having multiple screens in front of me at all times when I'm researching, and I bounce around a lot of times, and I'm reading multiple things and trying to cram as much in my head as possible, and always having multiple sources. I think that's probably why my computer hates me. It's one of those things we have to do our own research and really start looking into what we're being told by mainstream. And I think alternative networks are growing, and we're finding more of those people that are willing to say, hey, you're a free individual human being. Now fly. Be yourself. Don't worry about what's the new fad. Worry about learning what freedom is and how that enriches your life and the people around you. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great weekend, and stay tuned here on UCY.tv for all the great broadcasts coming up after this.